virtually.
Okay, sounds good.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Counselor, we're live. I thought maybe your TV experience was on TVO's Blind Dates. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, those are really interesting. They have elected officials. So sometimes it's like federal, provincial and municipal, and they talk about an issue, and they call it blind date because they don't know each other, but they go and they talk about different things and go to visit different communities. Anyways, you should Google that. They're really interesting and very current, and that's on TVO, and you can watch them
I'll
online.
do that.
Yeah, it's Political Blind Date is what it's called.
So just to let everyone know, we are live now. I'm just calling the meeting to order at 10:31 a.m. We're just going to, next step will be the election of officers. Do I have a nomination for chair?
I'd like to nominate Dennis Doyle.
I'll second it.
Sorry, who seconded that there?
Wayne did.
And then I just need, if there isn't any other nominations, I can have a motion that the chair be closed. Can I have someone to move that?
Are there any other nominations?
I'll move.
And Dennis, do you accept
Got
that?
3 movers, Brianna.
I have it as Mike and Jim. Do you accept that nomination, Dennis?
I do. Sounds like I'm getting married here.
And then I'll just conduct the election of vice chair. Do we have a nomination for that?
Who's the vice chair now?
I nominate Wayne.
Mike Keane.
Okay.
Oh,
Mike, do you want to continue?
I'm happy to continue.
I'll nominate Mike Keane.
I'll second it, Wayne. Wayne seconded it.
Okay, and is there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay, and I just need a mover and a mover to close the nomination for vice chair.
I'll move that it's closed.
I'll move.
Okay, and seconded.
Second.
And Mike, do you accept that nomination?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, and Deputy Warden Dennis Doyle, you can take over as chair.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll call the meeting to order, which I guess it already has been. The first resolution is that the agenda of the March 2nd, 2021 meeting of the Communal Services Governance Operation Model Review Committee be adopted. Would somebody?
When so moved?
Yeah. Councillor Smith and Wayne Robinson seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. The next one is, does anybody have a pecuniary interest in the nature thereof to declare today? Having seen none, we'll record that in the minutes and move on. And we have some minutes from our last meeting on December 15th. And the resolution reads that the minutes of the Communal Services Governance Operation Model Review Committee meeting held December 15th be adopted. And can we have a mover? Fran and Jim McIntosh. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Having seen none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. We'll move on to the presentation. And I think Alec and his team have a presentation. We had some good reading in the package. So I think Alec will take us through the highlights.
That sounds good. Thanks, Dennis. Just a quick note on that. We don't actually have a presentation prepared for today. Really, the intent of today is to just have an open discussion about the draft report that was submitted and any questions, concerns, changes, whatever, ideas therein. With that said, I thought what I'd probably do is start by going through just a quick run through of the executive summary, just to get everyone's mind sort of back in order here, remind us of what we're talking about. So I'll do a quick zip through the executive summary of the report here, and then basically open the floor up for discussion was our intent. Any questions or comments on that before I start to go through the executive summary?
Very light reading, only
No,
52
other than
pages.
it looks like.
Yeah,
And the overall conclusion is the Municipal Service Corporation is the way we, I think, all previously agreed to go, which has lots of justification in the report as well.
That is the Coles notes, and I think it sounded like it maybe was Jim I didn't see, or Jim who had said light reading at 52 pages. It did turn out a little longer than we had anticipated, but at the end of the day, I'm actually really happy with the way the report came together. But anyway, we can talk about that. So why don't we, if I'm hearing no complaints, I'll do a really quick walkthrough of the executive summary just to remind us all, and then we can get into a discussion. And why don't I might as well share my screen here so you guys can see what I'm looking at.
I might lose people's faces when that happens. So if somebody's got a question, speak loudly.
Yeah, it's a good point. Can everybody see my screen, and is it big enough to read?
Fine with me.
In as much as you want
Perfect.
to read.
It's good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So executive summary, WSP Canada was hired alongside municipal government wayfinders to help Frontenac County conduct an evaluation of potential governance models for management of communal water and wastewater services in the county. Basic context is that the region is looking to grow, but it's hard to build densely and affordably centralized services, not a financially feasible option. Private well and septic development doesn't allow for dense development and overall sort of lower quality of water and wastewater services. The mandate that WSP had here was to do a brief review of municipal responsibility agreements, their sort of context requirements, conduct a review of governance and management structure best practices in Ontario, develop an initial set of governance and management models for assessment for this, and then recommend a preferred model and update the financial model that we'd previously developed, as well as we added on a couple of little pieces to help with the financial evaluation once the work got underway. And then, of course, finalizing a report and presenting. Basic pieces of work then, we conducted a fairly extensive best practice review and peer review, interviewing 5 municipalities across the province, including Township Oro-Medonte, Lakeland Holding, which is up in the sort of Muskoka area, Grand Bend Area Joint Sewage Board, Edwardsburg Cardinal and Prescott Joint Water Board, and then the Union Water Supply System. And the basic intent of that peer review was to figure out what have others done in the province, what has worked well, what has not worked well, what would they recommend to another region, what are the practices that we think are appropriate for Frontenac, and what are the practices that are not. Where we landed then is we landed on there's several different options we could look at: a joint municipal services board between the townships, a sort of county level model where the county is the entity in charge of the board or the decision-making apparatus, a municipal services corporation, a private utility, or some other mix therein. Of those items, I'm going to leaf over the municipal responsibility agreement component because that wasn't really our main focus here. Suffice to say that on the MRAs, basically we discussed with the Ministry of Environment to learn more about what are the restrictions, what are the requirements around municipal responsibility agreements, and we've tried to outline in this section some of the tidbits we've found, probably not directly relevant to this study or this immediate conversation, but hopefully useful to you as you move forward with actually implementing.
I do have
this.
a comment on that component, Alex,
Sure.
if I could, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Jim.
Just when we talk about the first part on the municipal responsibility agreements, kind of the D52 guidelines, the second bullet point, most people won't understand when you say the guidelines stipulate that MRAs are not to be used for communal servicing of multi-lot unit freehold residential development. This report will probably go to the public, and most people will say, well, we can't use it for subdivision because that's multi-lot unit development, where I don't think that's the intent at all. So I think that clause is really geared towards condominium developments, and I'm thinking more for, you know, larger freehold buildings. Maybe we want to expand that a little bit, either here or where it comes up later in the report.
So basically, to make it clear that a single owner, a single corporate owner of something like a retirement home could engage in an MRA, this is really meant for more like condo boards or sort of collective ownership across a broad group of people.
Yeah, I know what it means, but I don't think the majority of the public that read this report will appreciate what it means.
Okay, so
Maybe a few more words required there to explain it.
yeah, and we can talk about that a little more, Jim, as we get into the discussion here. I want to make sure, because you raise a good point, and there was certainly some discussion, and I would say a bit of misunderstanding as well, even at the, not even at the public level, but when we chatted with all the treasurers and planners across the townships, there was some sort of misunderstandings or confusion about where we can or cannot use MRAs as well. So I think, why don't we have a quick discussion on that today and make sure everyone on the call understands and is on board with what the report is saying, and then we can decide you know, what more we need to add to the report to make that clear for the sake of the public.
Okay.
Okay, so that was MRAs. We then talked about, or we then went through an assessment of the different governance and management structure models, landing on, we ruled out a couple of models, the private utility on the basis that water is an essential service and therefore it is not allowed to be privatized under provincial law, a municipal buyer-seller model where one township owns the entire system and basically sells water to other townships was ruled out because you'd get into weird situations of one township owning infrastructure in another township and that kind of thing. And an independent model where every township, you know, free for all, everyone for themselves, we ruled out as being too likely to create confusion and municipalities working sort of at odds with one another. Which is to say, the ones that we landed on for further review were a municipal services corporation, a joint municipal board, or a county level model. Skimming through some of these more detailed findings a little bit, the county level model proved problematic in that for it to be viable, the townships would need to transfer powers for water jurisdiction up to the county, which of course creates, you know, there's political ramifications there, but also, you know, it's a question of transferring power away, which of course is always a bit of a touchy issue. And yes, it can be reversed, but it's not as easy as having a 5-minute conversation and snapping your fingers. So it just created a bit of a sort of looming concern or headache. On the joint municipal board side of things, we found in other applications in the province that there is room for disagreement. There is room for it to become political, and a risk of one municipality, say, outvoting all the others or retaining some kind of dominant share, which could also lead to difficulties. And so overall, from both I think a feasibility perspective and efficiency, perspective, we landed on the Municipal Services Corporation as being the most likely. We did put together an estimate of the timeline and cost for putting a Municipal Services Corporation together, and came up with a cumulative 10-year cost in the neighborhood of $2.2 million. And then we outlined recommendations with respect to how a Municipal Services Corporation be implemented, what the board should look like, how voting could work, and some considerations for operations. And maybe I will leave it there, as well as these next steps for implementation. Maybe I'll leave it there for now, and open the floor up for discussion. And maybe, Jim, if you'd like, I'm more than happy to go back and explore the MRA question a little more to make sure everyone on the phone is on the same page, if you think that's valuable. But if you think that's not a worthwhile discussion, we can move on to the next item.
Jim?
Yeah, I would like to have, I'd like to follow Jim's point a little bit more, because I'd like to understand what kind of a project we would be looking at, or whatever we could look at, and sort of the restrictions on that.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I agree as well. I think it's a critical point for all of us. And as Jim said, leading to the public understanding.
Okay. So let's talk about that then. And I will do my best to give my understanding of the Municipal Responsibility Agreement guidelines and restrictions. And then we can go from there. Anyone else, both WSP and Michael Wildman and anyone from the county, just interrupt or speak up if you ever disagree or have questions. The basic intent of an MRA is to provide a corporate entity with the ability to provide a sort of communal water wastewater system, such that if that corporate entity walks away from the site or the job or whatever it is, the Ministry of Environment feels confident that the municipality has said, yes, we've approved this development, we've approved this system, and we will step in and pay to make good on the system so that people don't have to leave their homes. That's the basic idea of a municipal responsibility agreement. There was some confusion or questions during the meeting we had with the treasurers and planners, et cetera, saying, oh, we think a condo board is acceptable, or some kind of multi-unit system. It's just a corporation. We think that they either should be able to own or engage in an MRA, or they will be able to soon. And so we specifically called the Ministry of Environment to discuss this. And the answer we were given is that MRAs are not intended for any kind of multi-ownership scenario where individuals own their own home and several of them then group together, have a communal system, and then set up an MRA, a municipal responsibility agreement, with the municipality. That is not the intent. And the reasoning there is that water is an essential service. The ministry cannot turn it off. So if I'm Bill and I live in some kind of collective system, whether it's a condominium or any other arrangement, if I decide one day to stop paying my bill, nobody, the condo corp or whoever is operating the water system is not allowed to turn off my water. And what that means is the corporate entity, whoever it is paying the bills, is now in a tough spot whereby Alec has decided to stop paying. Wayne and Mike and Jim and Gwen and everyone else have decided to keep paying. Alec has decided not to. And now the system is in financial jeopardy, but the ministry or the municipality can't turn off the water, and they can't kick people out of their homes. So what do we do? And so the intent of an MRA is to say, we don't want to engage in an agreement with this multi-party group where where one person can decide to stop paying, but the others decide that they want to keep paying and they still want to live there. It's the intention is to say, hey, you know, you're a nursing home corporation. You own a site. Maybe you've got individual units on that site. Maybe we have 50 people or 100 people living there and using a communal system, but one corporate entity owns that equipment and one corporate entity pays that bill. And if they decide not to pay it or not to maintain it, you know, then the municipality has to go after exactly one entity. And of course, it's not going to be in the best interest of that corporation to say, look, we just don't want to pay to maintain the system. They're not going to get new people moving in, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the intent, is to prevent a scenario where you've got sort of this multi-ownership thing going on, where the owners might not be on the same wavelength about should I pay, how much do I pay, when do I pay, all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Well, I like to make it clear in this report, can we put some words in such as this is meant for condominium owned developments?
We can certainly add language to this, yeah, and you know, I can even scroll down and check what we've said. Not that that really matters. The point, you know, if there's any doubt on this, then clearly we need to add more to this. But
this, as Jim said earlier, the big issue is if somebody from the public picks this up, they'll be quite confused what it means, and if we can clarify it right in that statement.
Okay, so that's where we can certainly add more to this, but in my mind, I don't see this as being particularly misleading, in as much as, simply put, it's not to be used for multi-lot or unit freehold residential development. It isn't. It's meant for, you know, it can be a single big lot with many different housing units on it, but it's meant for that sort of single big lot, single corporate entity ownership. But we'll certainly add that MRAs are intended to be used basically for single corporate owners, not including condominiums or other types of corporate entities which really have distributed ownership. I think that's the key here, maybe.
Gwen speaking, could you add to that something where the basically putting the intent is so that the individual unit does not have the option of opting out of payments, or, you know, kind of explaining it that way?
Yeah, we can.
Specific.
We could do that. I mean, I think the key, I mean, the reality is that, for example, somebody living in a retirement home, if they're using a communal system, they could stop paying their water bill.
Yeah.
But then I think the retirement home, the corporation would say, sorry, if you're not paying your bills, you're not allowed to stay here. You know, you don't own the site. We, the corporation,
I don't
own the site.
understand where the condo board isn't. It's not an entity in itself. I don't know condo rules, but I mean, it seems it would be beholding to the payment to the water services then.
Yeah, so the trick with the condo board, and the reason they say they don't like to engage, that the Ministry of Environment does not like to approve MRAs with a condo board, is because even though a condo board is a corporate entity and it's a single corporate entity, the individuals who make up that condo board or that condo corporation, they own their own property, right? If you own your unit, you're not renting it. You don't have a landlord.
But you only own the inside of it.
You do, but what that means is you can't be evicted, right? Because right, that's the issue, is you own that, so you can't be told you have to move out of your house. And that's where the trick comes in, is if it's an apartment building that one corporate entity owns, if you stop paying your rent, yeah, you're allowed to be evicted. But if you don't pay your water bill to the condo board can't say this is no longer your house, you have to move out.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's the basic trick. So I think certainly we will add some language around this to make it clear that it should be a single corporate entity. Condo boards are not allowed, and the intent is to provide an agreement for situations where there are multiple people using a single system, but those people are not directly responsible for paying the bill for a piece of property that they own themselves. They are paying a bill to a corporation or something who owns the bigger, broader site. I think that's the
Yeah.
key that we need to make clear.
Alex, it's Jim McIntosh here. If I can,
I like it.
Dennis, is it okay if I make some comments?
Yes, go ahead, Jim. You got the floor.
I think, Alex, a municipal responsibility agreement is an agreement between a developer and a municipality whereby the municipality is taking responsibility for a system a developer constructed and installed on the developer's property, and the developer is going to continue to maintain it. And this agreement gives the municipality not only the authorization, but gives them the authority to enter in and look after that system should the developer not be maintaining it properly. And the province has set up basically a protocol as to what developers the municipality can in fact engage in this type of thing with. And they're not allowing at this point in time the use of condominiums as an example. That's kind of the way I understand how this works. If the municipality owns the system, then we're entering into an agreement to make sure that we get our money to look after it, but it's not necessarily an MRA that's approved by the province. Am I at the lunch, or is that not kind of how this thing works?
You're about 2/3 correct, I think, or you're mostly correct, but maybe just missing a piece. So you're basically right, and you're correct that if a developer builds a system and hands over ownership to the municipality, which, by the way, is the way that this is likely to go in most cases, and that's what we've seen elsewhere in the province. Developer builds a system, they build 100 houses or 100 units, they build a water system, then that ownership gets handed over immediately to the municipality. When that ownership is handed over, there is no need for an MRA because the municipality owns it. The MRA is only there if a private entity owns the system. To your point about it being for a developer to own a system and then have an agreement with the municipality in case the developer walks away, that can be the case if the developer intends to stick around and continue some kind of ownership of the site. But this is, I think, where this comes to a head. If a developer plans to build a site, build 100 units, sell them off and walk away, then they aren't a corporate entity that can enter an MRA with the municipality because they no longer own that water system, right? They've handed it off to whoever has bought the units. And if whoever has bought the units is something like a condo board, then an MRA will not be allowed. But if whoever's bought the units is an apartment, a property manager who runs an apartment building or something like that, then yes, they would be allowed to enter into an MRA because they are that single corporate entity whom the municipality, for lack of a better word, I suppose it's the one throat to choke when you don't pay or you don't fix things, as opposed to that distributed model. So that is the way MRAs are meant to be used, is to have this single corporate entity who can or enter into an agreement with the municipality. It's not really meant, I think, for developers to and sorry, that's I'm glossing over a little bit. You could maybe have an MRA with a developer in early years of a system where maybe half a site has been sold and half of a site is not yet sold, in which case the developer is still on the hook for making sure the system is running. If they have not handed ownership over to the municipality, but they're still there developing units and they still own the site. But basically, as soon as that developer has sold off its ownership, they're done. There's no MRA with that developer anymore, and certainly not for the next 30 years, because an MRA is supposed to be there indefinitely, so that if a system fails after 10 years of life, after 15 years, still the municipality doesn't want to have to be on the hook for that. So they're trying to enter into an agreement with this corporate entity that says whenever the failure comes, you're going to be there to fix it, or you've provided financial assurance of some kind or another to mitigate that. That's the basic idea. Does that make sense, Jim? Does that help? Did I just confuse you more?
I'm not so worried about confusing me as I am worried about confusing the public that reads this report. So maybe what we need to give them is some more information that in all likelihood, an MRA is only going to be an interim step until full municipal ownership occurs for any system that's going to be developed under this basis.
Yeah, and frankly, honestly, I don't even know that you'd probably go that route. As I say, the examples we've seen elsewhere in the province, ownership is just handed over immediately, basically. The developer might continue to pay operating and maintenance costs for the first few years, but ownership is handed over pretty much immediately. And I think that's the most logical path. It's just simple. It means you don't need to get into an MRA at all. It means the municipality owns it from day one and they understand their asset from day one rather than a few years in. So, you know, we can, I think certainly we should go back and try to tidy up the language here. And maybe what we'll do is focus on this and resend just this component, Jim, to you and maybe to others on the phone if they're keen on reading that, to make sure we really nail this section correctly. But I think
what we may be able to do here, Alex, is just reference the main body of your report that has a much longer description of the MRA. So it's in section 2.2 of the main report. You get into it quite a bit more. So maybe for here, all we do is in this part of it, in the executive summary, you know, suggest people refer to the main report, and then let's take a look at whether we need to beef that up a little more or not. And perhaps you're right. Maybe the best way to do it is to do this as kind of a separate thing with either all the committee or some of the committee members looking at it, whatever Dennis thinks is appropriate.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. We can certainly say refer to section 2.2 for more information. And for what it's worth, I'd be more than happy to sit here all day and talk about this and really nail it down now. I just want to make sure we do have a chance to talk about other things as well. So I'm good with your suggestion for now. We'll certainly say refer to the longer section in the report, and then we can revise some language there and or in the executive summary as we think is needed. We'll send it to you and Dennis and anyone else who wants to take another closer look at that. And that'll be our solution to the MRA piece here. And maybe in the short term, then we can move on to any other questions or comments or feedback.
Through you,
Yeah,
Chair. I just wanted to make note that anything that has to be sent to the committee, unfortunately, has to be sent to me first, and then I can provide it to the committee just so that everyone receives the same information.
Yep, that sounds good.
Yeah, Brianna's a gatekeeper.
Sounds good.
That's a good point, Brianna. Thank you. Yeah, let's move on to discuss the next steps then. And thanks for bringing that up, Jim.
Well, Dennis, can I make one quick comment?
Need clarification. Yes, Ron, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to recap that discussion, because I knew nothing about it, but reading the report, this was provided as information as a research study that Alex and his team did. From what I read into this, it was provided there as an option, but it's not a viable option because it's between the municipality and a developer until the lots are sold. If we go with the Municipal Service Corporation, this is a new point because we would never get into that. Is that the way I interpret it, Alex?
Maybe. I don't think specifically that's the case. I believe an MSC would be able to enter into an MRA just the way a municipality would. So I don't know that the MSC specifically changes that, other than to say that, you know, as we've been discussing, I think that the practical solution is the MSC adopts ownership of any new system from day one. I simply think that's by far the easiest way for you guys to minimize your risk, simplify your operating model. Is just a developer can build a system, but once it's built, you guys own it. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. The time and place for, I think, to consider an MRA is if there is an entity like a Rivera, you know, a community, like an apartment building property manager, whatever, who comes in, they say, look, we want to build this apartment complex. We're going to build 100 units. We want a communal system, but we, the property manager, will own this system and maintain it just the way we do everything else on the property. That's when you consider an MRA and think about entering into it. Beyond that, I think basically you guys, you're just not going to use them. That's my, you know, I'm not a lifelong expert in this stuff, but that's my understanding of how this is going to go.
Alex, if I may just add, if an MRA were not applicable, then the municipality or the governing body would have the ability to enter into an agreement that would basically do the same thing as an MRA, and that would be through either a subdivision agreement or potentially a site plan agreement. So you would take securities until you're comfortable with how it's operating. You might set performance standards. You might have warranty periods. But Alex is right. You would generally own it from day one, but you would be postponing the full assumption of it until it's operating in a manner that meets your needs. And you would guarantee that through either a subdivision or site plan agreement, and with securities and insurance and all the things that go along with that.
Exactly. And that's, as I say, what we've seen elsewhere is that maybe a developer has sold half the site, and so they keep paying the O&M costs for the first few years until enough of the site is sold. But that ownership still goes to the municipality on day one, and they just collect securities and O&M costs, expenses, whatever, from the developer through some kind of subdivision or whatever agreement. Okay, so moving on. Any other?
Alec, just before you comment there, Alec, do we need the presentation up anymore because we lose the
nope,
the
not
visual of
specifically.
people?
Nope, only if people want to
If
go
you
and
need to bring
refer
it back now and again, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah, I'll turn it off for now.
Mr. Chair, maybe Alec,
That's better.
if you could just tell us roughly what page you're on, is just helpful to just follow along on side, but I
Sure,
agree
of
it's
course.
helpful to have all the faces on the screen. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
Good. So we're going to talk next steps, and because I think we talked in the past, we're going to present to each of the local township councils and those kind of next steps. So
yeah, we can certainly talk
floor,
about
Alex.
we can certainly talk about next steps like that. I guess I just want to make sure, are there any other points of concern or question or things you'd like to see changed, or generally you're happy with the report? We need to deal with the MRA thing and everyone's ready to talk about how we present this to the lower tiers and close the project out.
That you had mentioned over 10 years is a $2 million cost.
Yep.
Is there any ROI considered within that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, there is in the financial model we put together, which has been returned to the county and to the sort of financial, for lack of a better word, subcommittee that was reviewing. We did put together an estimate of what the expenses are to start up over that 10-year period and what revenues could be like under an assumption of, X number of communal systems being built of whatever size, and here are the revenues. So that has been shown, forecasted. It's not, I can't actually off the top of my head remember if it's shown, that sort of return is shown in the report or not. That was kind of an aside to the intent of what we were describing here, but that has been thought out. Yeah.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
I think
And Jim had a question, as did Ron. So Gwen, do you have another one? And then we'll move on to Jim.
Go ahead.
Good, thanks. Jim, you got the floor.
My question is, I guess, something totally different, but it just dawned on me this morning, and perhaps Kelly or Michael know the answer to this, but is a municipal service corporation eligible to apply for grants the same as a municipality would? So I'm thinking about, as an example, what happened in Sydenham, where a water system was put in and the municipality got a grant to help do that. Would the municipal service corporation have that same ability in the future? And that's just something I'd like to have clarified.
Yes, certainly. I'll use two examples. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus is essentially a municipal service corporation and applies for grants. The Eastern Ontario Regional Network, same thing. They're as eligible for grants as any municipality. The Eastern Ontario Leadership Council is currently going through a municipal service corporation incorporation for the sole purpose of being able to apply for grants. So our interpretation with both the federal and provincial government is similar to what WSP is saying, in that if it is affiliated with a municipality, it is as eligible as a municipality. And that's certainly been proven to be the case with the three organizations that I've mentioned.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing out on that potential revenue source.
Thanks, Kelly. And Ron, you've got the floor next.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. On page 7 of your report, you talk about the startup costs. I'm not sure what that covers. Does that cover salaries, insurance, the whole gambit?
Yeah, so we get into, I'm going to zip down, I think, to the lengthier discussion of costs. Let me just find the right page.
Legal fees and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, just bear with me for 1 second while I find the right section here. Salah, maybe you can help me remember. Is it in section 3.2 under the Municipal Service Corporation section there, or is there a different place where we discuss the, I think it's primarily there. If you go to page 25.
Alec, I think the best way is to look at the appendix. There's a breakdown by each line item in there.
In the appendix. So the appendix, if you're looking at the PDF copy of the report, it'll be in there. If you're looking at the Word document of the report, the appendix will probably not be there. Does everyone have a copy of the PDF in front of them or the Word document?
I'll put it up on
I do, but it just has a 1-page appendix A, appendix B, but no details.
In the PDF.
PDF.
Yeah, that's the same. That's the same. The one that we have doesn't have the appendix.
Oh, okay. Maybe you have the wrong copy in front of you then. We'll send this out right now.
That looks like this one. Has everybody got?
That's correct. Yeah, you've got the correct one there, Dennis. So I guess somehow we've got multiple versions floating around here a little bit.
For you, Chair. So the PDF that I sent out on February 17th is this copy, and the one, if you took it down from iCompass, it would be the Word that would be accessible. So it wouldn't be the exact same layout.
Okay. Brianna, would you be able to maybe resend the copy from, I think you'd said February 17th, but the PDF copy, when we had sent you, it was the PDF version, and I think that would have all of the appendices included. Would you be able to send that out to everyone again on the call, and maybe people can pull that up and it'll help them follow along?
Yes, I should be able to do that. Give me 1 moment.
Okay.
Or can you just put it up on the screen, the pages we're talking about, Alec?
Yeah, Salah has it up on the screen right now. If you can see the screen.
I think that's good enough.
Okay.
Can we make it a little bit bigger?
Of course. Is that better?
Yeah.
That's perfect.
So you can see there we get into line items for an MSC, developing and refining a business case, consultations, adopting a business plan, etc. And then down below, you see we have that's sort of the roll up in blue up at the top. And then we have a breakdown below for each of those individual line items. So within the business case development, we have a legal review, an operational review, corporate structure, etc. So that is all shown there. Does that answer your question, Ron, about the detail of where the expenses come from?
I was sort of looking like if we had the Municipal Service Corporation, the actual setup cost on page 7, I thought that was legal requirements. Everything to run an operation was included in that.
It is. So I think what's shown in the main body is just this sort of top level summary of what we're looking at here. But basically what we've tried to show is 2 separate costs. One is a startup, sort of one-time startup cost, saying, you know, with a sort of low and a high estimate, but here are all the fees we think you're going to spend on day 1 to get going. And then separately an annual cost for what we think it's going to take to run the thing for the first, I think it was the first 10 years. Saying, you know, here's what you're going to spend basically roughly on an annual basis over that time.
Okay. All right. And second question I wanted, I was reading through the report and I really couldn't define in my own head why this could not happen. But in relation to the 4 townships in the county, we're talking about voting, the county can't vote, etc. They can't be a member of the board. Could you just sort of clarify verbally for me that I was trying to understand the implications of why that can't happen, but I found it difficult reading different sections and trying to put it together in my head.
Sure. So you're wondering why the county is allowed to be a partial owner, but is not eligible to vote?
Correct.
Okay. So it's a fairly straightforward explanation. So my apologies if we've made it more complicated in the report than it needs to be. The long and the short of it is, it's okay, I think, for the county to own it because the county is a public entity in the right jurisdiction, particularly in as much as there are wastewater systems being built as communal systems. The county has jurisdiction over wastewater, and that's shared with townships. However, water services, drinking water, those powers, because Frontenac County is a county, not a regional, not a region, I guess, as it's termed within the sort of municipal acts within Ontario. But because Frontenac County is a county, the county does not have jurisdiction over water services. And that's why when we talked about doing the county level ownership model, we were going to have to transfer powers from the lower tiers up, because right now, county does not have a say over water. And so to have voting rights within the MSC, since the MSC will be making decisions about water services, we think it's not only probably not appropriate, but I think probably not legal for the county to be voting on decision making with respect to water infrastructure, since the county has no say over that. Does that make sense?
I guess that's where I'm and I guess that's where I'm having a problem, is because the county is sort of the upper tier of the municipality. So to me, we're all one municipality in kind of respect. But if it's I guess in what area of the legislation does not allow that? Is that Ministry of Environment, Municipal Affairs, or just trying to formulate in my mind why the county can't be part of this?
Good question. I might turn to Salah, who did the digging through the acts for that. Do you remember exactly where in the act it mentions, Salah, that that's the case?
This is in the Municipal Act, basically the limiting clauses at the beginning of an act that most clauses that follow will have to abide by, and it defines, what a county is, what a region is, and what the jurisdiction of power breakdown is.
So a single tier county can go ahead and do it because they have control of the water, but the upper tier can't because they don't have control of the water. Is that the rationale?
Well, it's even more specific than that. Some upper tier municipalities can, again, like Region of Peel, Region of Durham, they do have jurisdiction over water, but County of Frontenac does not. County of whoever else, probably Prince Edward County, does not. I think what it really is a historical artifact. It basically probably shouldn't be this way, but it is. And here we are. It looks like Kelly has a comment here.
Yeah, Kelly, if you got your hand up, you've got the floor.
So let's distinguish between, can the county invest? Yes, the county can invest. Can the county vote? No, the county can't vote. And 2 reasons: one, in the spheres of influence in the Municipal Act, and second, it would set up that awkward situation where Ron Higgins could vote yes on an issue representing North Frontenac and no on an issue vote representing the county of Frontenac. You are the county, so you'd be voting twice for similar purposes. It just doesn't make sense for the county to be a voting member because the county is essentially the member.
Yeah, that makes sense, Kelly. Thank you.
Okay,
I understand that now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. We seem to have lost your video. Was that on purpose?
It's still showing here, but it's I'll go off and on again.
Oh, it's your slow internet. Okay, Alec, shall we move on to next steps?
Sure. If there are no further questions about the report content, certainly happy to move on to next steps here. Any sort of last call for any other comments, questions?
Having seen none, we'll move on.
Okay. So then next steps, I think as we see it, probably first things first, we would like to finalize the report so that everybody on the call is in agreement with what the report looks like, the final report looks like before it goes out anywhere else. So that'll be item number 1 on our agenda. And then item number 2, I think, is setting up a presentation to the lower tier councils. We talked about that at the beginning, putting in a presentation to those councils. And I think we decided on one sort of larger call where we can have council members all join in, into a Zoom call or whatever. And basically, we will walk through the study to present that to the lower tiers to keep them apprised of what's been done, how we've landed, where we've landed. And that's really, I think, that's left in our scope at this point. But maybe we could spend a few minutes talking about on the presentation to lower tiers side of things, specifically what you think is appropriate to present to them, which is to say, I'm sure we could spend 10 hours presenting to them, but no one's going to have patience for 10 hours. So I think, what would be helpful from our point of view is to have a quick discussion on how long do you think is an appropriate presentation? What level of detail do we want to get into? Do we want to focus on here are the outcomes and where we've landed and why? Do we want to focus on here's the context and the background, and by the way, here's the decision? Do we want to focus for them on the decision's been made, here are the 20 next steps for the county? What is most useful or interesting, do you think, to the lower tiers, and what's their sort of time limit in terms of their availability or their interest for this?
I would think to start it off that an hour would be probably as much as we want to go. And I think we want to give them a high level overview of the other areas, the other municipalities and similar ventures that we've explored, and then the outcomes.
Okay.
Does anybody have any suggestions? Wayne, do I see you moving to ask a question?
Mayor Vanderwall sent me a little note and I want to pass it on. He says, I hope you represent the municipal liability concerns and financials, because I'm unavailable for the meeting. So I can't help but think that the mayor is saying that in our presentation, we want to make sure that we are talking about municipal liability. I think we need to address that in our presentation, because that's what will come up. Like, what are we going to be stuck with, or how is this going to decrease or make it better for our municipality?
Yeah.
Okay. So we can do that.
The risks and benefits.
Yeah, sure. I think that's what he's saying. I mean, that you heard the whole note to me, so.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We can do that. I think so. What I'm hearing so far is we'll do a high level run through of the study, how it came to be, where we landed, all of that. And then maybe we'll do a bit of a focus on municipal liability and the sort of risks, benefits, finance surrounding all of this. And then we'll probably end off on a slide of here are the 5 or 10 next steps for moving this thing the next phase forward, and try to leave maybe 20 minutes at the end, 20 minutes out of the hour for questions. Does that sound about right?
It does to me. Fran and Ron, what do you think? Is an hour about enough? I kind of picked that number out of the air, but
I think more than an hour, you will lose them. I think, first of all, we need to send out the complete summary and then the highlights. And I would suggest that they go out at least a week before the meeting, because it's a lot of reading and people need to go back to it a couple of times to understand it, I think. And I think as far as the presentation, 40 minutes, 20 minutes for questions is probably lots.
Okay. Maybe even erring on the side of 30 and 30 or something like that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with an hour as well. But one question I had before we do this meeting, should this group be deciding on what share allocation and financial contribution model we want to use? Because if we start presenting different options at that meeting, it could open up a lot of confusion or questions. So just asking this committee if we should be deciding on which options before we do the meeting with the townships.
Well, certainly, I think we have to say we're recommending, not
Yeah.
deciding, but recommending.
Yeah. Yeah, because we do want to put it to them. We want their feedback before final decisions, but no problem with recommending what we think.
Okay. I think
So
that's
then-
what Ron Vanderwall was getting on as well. So in my opinion, I like option 2 to start things off with.
If I can add to that, then, I would say that portion of the decision-making recommendations falls a little bit beyond, beyond our, not beyond our interest, but at the end of the day, to WSP, it doesn't really matter how you choose. I think you can go multiple ways, and that's fine. So maybe what I'll suggest is, why don't we, so actually 2 things to back up for a second to Fran's point. Is it suggested or requested that we send out a full copy of the PDF report to the lower tiers? We can do it, today if you'd like, or obviously we'll wait till we've made these edits on MRA stuff and whatever, but we can send that out immediately so they have full information. Let it wait a week or 2, and then we can have this presentation. But I guess what I'm thinking is on the presentation side, we can prepare a presentation, a PowerPoint, send it to your team. And then that way, if the council wants to, or the governance committee wants to put together a couple of slides on, here's what we recommend with respect to how we fund this thing, or here's the way we envision things, we can have a couple of slides there so you can prepare that material to your satisfaction, and that sort of is outside the recommendations that we're making. Because as I say, I don't want to present it to them as here's what we're proposing. At that point, when you're talking about how do you split up those costs, that's sort of more into where, it's something we could certainly help you think through moving forwards, but it's not something we've really thought through in detail as part of this assignment. Does that make sense?
I think that's a good idea. And I think another piece to that is we could ask our treasurers, for the 4 of them, to sit down and talk about what each of those options mean to the tax rate or to the residents, and bring a report to our committee before we go to all the councils.
Good point.
Sounds a good plan, Fran.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds reasonable. So I think then what we'll do is and by going this route anyway, we'll prepare this presentation and we'll send it over to your team so you can have a chance to go through, make sure you're happy with the presentation. So that'll be step number 2. Step number 1 is finalizing the report. We'll get that over to you when this committee is happy with that. Then I think through Brianna or whoever, we can send that report out to the lower tiers. And then, we'll get you the draft presentation. You can add whatever slides you'd like, or once your treasurers have confirmed, add the slides as you see appropriate on that sort of division of cost. And that'll be our next set of steps here.
Through you,
Okay,
Chair, Alec, through
yes,
you, Chair,
go
I
ahead,
think
Nadine.
Alec, before we finalize the report, I think we need to update the MRA section
of course,
first. Yeah.
For
So
sure.
I think that's really step
maybe.
1. Thanks.
Yeah, we have to kind of give it the blessing before it goes to the each municipality. And maybe Kelly, could you coordinate getting the treasurers together, or who's best to handle that?
For sure, Mr. Chair, not a problem.
Yeah, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
The CAOs actually have a meeting scheduled for April the 1st. It's probably easiest that we just invite the treasurers to the same meeting, and if we can get everybody together in a room, we can go through it at that meeting.
And what date was that again, Kelly?
April Fool's Day.
Oh, okay.
April 1st. What were you thinking
Yeah,
in
so
terms of timing? I just know we're in the middle of year end for our treasurers, and it's a bit hectic at the moment, but.
That's true. Auditors and budgets and
So if April the 1st
So the
works,
meeting,
we've already got a date established. If you'd like it sooner, I'll work with the CAOs and treasurers to have an earlier date.
I think April 1st
is
is a good
mid-April.
date.
Is mid-April soon enough to have the meeting with the 4 municipalities? We'd want to have that after Kelly discusses with the treasurers. Kind of mid-April timeframe. Is that okay, Fran and Ron?
I think so. I think that's good timing.
Fine by me.
Yeah, okay, so that's what we'll target, and then Kelly has lots of time between April 1st and that day to finalize what the treasurer's feedback is.
And by sending this report out in the near future, it gives everyone time to really put some thought into it, because it's major for our municipalities. And if they're well educated on what it's about, we should get a positive result.
Yep, that sounds good to me.
So when you say immediately, Fran, you mean by, say, March 15th, or do you want it earlier than that?
Well, Alec was talking about sending out as soon as he does some tweaks to it in the next week or so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically it won't take us too long to make edits to the MRA section. We'll do that. We'll get it back to you guys through Brianna, so that you guys have a chance to look. And when we hear from Brianna that yes, we're okay with the language, that's the revised language, the revised report, then at that point, we'll just finalize the document, send it to you guys, and you can send it out immediately.
Can I suggest to Alec that instead of sending the whole report, just send us the section on the MRA that's in question?
Yep, we will, and just the executive summary blip as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Then the lower tiers will have roughly a month to look it over before the presentation, and mid-April is fine with us in terms of presenting to the lower tiers. There's no problem there.
And we as mayors can encourage our councillors to put some time into the document.
Exactly. Yes, Jim?
Are you anticipating, Mr. Chair, that this committee would get back together again after the clerks and treasurers meet, but before it goes out to the public, so we can make some recommendations in relation to the financial component that was mentioned before? As far as breakdown of who pays the costs and so on, is that the idea or not?
Well, I think that's a good idea. So somewhere around the end of the first week in April, we'd meet, and then the joint meeting would be mid-April. Does everybody think that's a good timing?
Yes, I agree. I think that's
good for me.
Great timing.
Yeah. So Brianna, maybe you could work out deciding on the date.
How about the 7th of April? It's a Wednesday.
Let me just look at my trusty calendar here. I think that looks good for me. How about everybody else?
Good for me.
Sorry, what was the date?
That's Wayne.
The 7th?
It's Wednesday, April the 7th.
Yeah, I'm good.
As long as we're done by 12:30, I'm fine.
Yes, yeah.
And through
Okay,
you,
so-
Chair, are we looking at, again, 10:30 a.m. or are we looking to have that again at 9?
Well,
What works best?
10:30 works for me, as long as Jim said we're through by 12:30.
I'm in the same meeting as Jim at 12:30. So, but the 10:30 is also better because I have an ongoing regular 9:30 as well.
10:30 it is.
It's a deal.
Wednesday's always a full day.
Brianna, we've decided right now, so no need for doodle polls or anything else.
Perfect. I'll send out the calendar invite.
Good.
But
Perfect.
maybe I'm a bit of a pessimist, or maybe it's experience. But with the report being circulated, there's more of a chance of media being hold of it. So I think we should designate who speaks on behalf of the report. Should it be out to the public before it is finalized and put to bed, so to speak?
I think that's what the chair gets the big bucks for.
I was suggested that, but I just wanted us to make sure that everybody's online with that, right?
So in other words, if people get questions, defer to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, you can
However,
refer it to whomever you feel can answer that particular.
Well, then I'll coordinate, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but just so we know that not everybody will be out there interpreting the report. I hope and doubt that it will come to that, but just should it.
well, and it shouldn't get out to the public until it comes to the council table. That's when it becomes a public document with the agenda.
Yeah.
But I think individual councillors, it shouldn't go to the press yet.
No,
We'll see.
but the word should has its complications.
Yeah, yeah. If somebody
For sure.
objects to something in it, they might just give it to their favorite press person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You never know. Just because, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, right?
Yeah, true.
I think
But-
through you, Mr. Chair, there'll come a point where whether it has to become public. So I'm not even sure if even what our meeting right now, that the report might be public.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right, we're
Yeah, it's on
technically
YouTube, isn't
public
it?
now.
Yeah. So
We've got no secrets.
yeah, it's still talking with one voice always helps rather than multiple ones.
And on that note, I mean, I think if any questions come directly to us, we'll just refer them back to your team to address.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, you have another point?
I assume then the main item for discussion on April 7th will be the share ownership and financial contributions that will be made, and this committee making a recommendation in that regard. And then perhaps if something comes up from the municipal clerks and treasurers group or the CAOs group, they can provide that back to us ahead of time. So we're ready to talk about that as well. That be appropriate, Mr. Chair?
That would, yes. And Kelly, I guess you'll have some feedback for us after April 1st.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Fran, you had a comment?
I was just going to say, and before the 7th.
Oh, yes, it have to be before the 7th. Okay. Anything else under next steps? Are we all organized? Can we
Yes,
move on?
Dennis, I guess you can't see. I had my hand up. I guess you can't see me still. So
No, you've been
I guess in
frozen
next-
for, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So next steps, starting on page 17 of 58, it says formally confirm MSC selection. Is that something we can do today?
I think we've done that.
I thought we did that at the
Okay.
last meeting, but
We did.
we did, yeah. Wayne, you recall that too?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can I ask Kelly a question? Under the next steps for implementation, there's quite a number of things to do in that. Have we budgeted for all of this, or is this going to be a budget item?
It would be part of those startup costs identified by WSP, and just looking at, and we've just gone through it with the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council. So it can be as, the legal costs for that, for example, were less than $8,000 and the template is already there. So it's truly the business plan portion. I suspect we've got the vast majority of that between the two WSP reports and what Joe and the planners can put together. So I suspect it wouldn't be too onerous at the lower end of the WSP estimate. So it would be part of the startup costs.
So based on what you just said, we have to formally put the MSC together before we can get the money to do the next steps 2 through 7.
Yeah, it's a little bit of chicken and egg here, but the business plan has to be done as part of the presentation. So for the example, the Leadership Council put forward their strategic plan from 2019 as the business plan, along with the governance model that was approved by the OLC board. So a similar type thing could happen here, although there are things like the dividend policy and the asset policy that need to be considered. And like all good policy, they're best dealt with in the abstract rather than in the face of a policy decision. So things like, you know, if Stone Mills, for example, wanted to join, what's the cost to join? If the MSC wanted to, and South Frontenac agreed, look at the asset in Sydenham, how does that get taken care of? I'd also note that Central Frontenac, and congratulations, Mayor Smith and Joe and Central staff just received an FCM grant to do the engineering for the old school site. So that very well could be the first asset that comes under this corporation. So there is some work to be done, but the major costs, I think, are out of the way at this point.
And maybe at the April 7th meeting, Kelly, you could give a short presentation on that, what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a problem. And because we've been through it a few times in the last 2 years, it's a process that's fairly well worn at this point. So.
And Fran, did I see your hand
Thanks,
up when Kelly was talking?
No, I was just saying that it was great that we got a grant to
Oh,
go
thumbs
forward.
up. That
Yeah.
It was thumbs up. Okay, good. Understand.
Congrats.
Even though we can't announce it yet.
You may just have it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Kelly did it.
What I just said, please ignore me.
Yeah.
Just like home. It's just like home.
Any other questions? And Ron, you're right. You're mostly frozen, so you'll have to speak up if you need to get the floor. If there's no more questions, we'll, I think, move on to item 8, which was communications, and it was basically this report we've just spent time talking about. Any questions on it? Any more questions, I should say? If not, I think we're down to other business, and I don't see any there. Does anybody else have other business to bring up before we move on to closure? And the next meeting, we already decided, is April 7th at 10:30. And Brianna will send out our Outlook calendar invite, and we'll be all set for that. Could I ask somebody to move that we adjourn? Fran and Wayne? And before we call the vote, I want to thank Alec and his team for all the work that's gone into this. So thanks for joining us today.
For sure.
Happy to join, and thanks for getting us involved.
Okay, and you'll be on your you'll put on your calendar for the next 2 meetings, the 7th and the 15th.
So actually, that's a good point. Is April 7th something that you would like our team involved with?
I suspect at least somebody from your team. What's the committee think?
What does Kelly think?
We're just as
Kelly still there? Yes, there he is.
Yeah, I think it's largely going to be a committee discussion, but if we get diverted at all, it would be nice to have Alec or Nadia or somebody from the team. You know, the discussion over shares and dividends gets, political and a bit complicated because you have to look at both ends of the equation. As I said, what happens if Stone Mills wants to buy in? What happens if the Sydenham water plant is going to be part of the corporation? And you want to make sure that you're incentivizing the right things. So, for example, they mentioned a mixed model of weighted assessment and units. So it may make sense to look at something that incentivizes a municipality to approve systems as well, since approval will always rest with the municipality, and that does that. And it makes it easier when bringing in new municipalities as well. So it is a complex discussion, and it crosses a number of different variables. So.
Okay, so if there's interest in having us there, that's not a problem. We'll maybe not the whole team, but at least 1 or 2 of us will join. So maybe if you could Brianna, when you send out that invitation, if you could copy us on it, then we can make sure that we're available. And I think my thought on that, Kelly, then is we'll plan to show up and sit in the background. And if you need us, we're there. And if you don't, then we'll, eat snacks and watch the show.
Which has pretty much been my life for the last year. So thank you.
And maybe we even can get together in person at that next meeting, but we'll see how COVID transpires here. Okay, if there's no more, I'll call the vote on adjourning. All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.